What is up, everybody? Welcome to the DFS MVP. I'm your host, TJ Hernandez, the director of DFS at 4for4.com. As always, with my trusty co-hosts. If you're watching, you see Daigle is getting ready to take a picture for his new dating profile. We got Kyren on the road now that he's in San Diego. He doesn't stay inside anymore. So it looks a little bit different, but we're going to keep on rocking like normal. What's up, boys? How you feeling?
A man gets one free night per week and then is forced to push back dinner. So we do this show and then we literally run out the door afterwards. But we're still ready for it. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm still working
thanks
on my,
everybody for coming in.
my scheduling skills here. Not very professional of me to be from the car here, but
you
look
gotta
how
be the
professional
worst
this
CEO.
operation is. I'm perfectly framed in this box right now. I mean, the production quality is amazing.
We're 4 weeks in and we've rescheduled twice because of you. You've got to be the worst CEO of all time.
Kyren is getting used to that sweet West Coast time zone life, so we will forgive him. Thank you to all the listeners and viewers that let us push back a little bit, but that's just more time to prep for everybody. As we mention every single week, partnered with Kyren and his fantastic site Legendary Upside. If you subscribe to that, you get the rundown every single week, like the most detailed breakdown of the week you're going to get matchups wise. We cover it pretty in depth as we go throughout these games, but every single week Kyren has a player that he likes to highlight before we jump into it. Your highlight guy this week, your cover boy this week was Justin Fields. Any thoughts on Fields before we hop into the game by game? Obviously, a lot of news around the Bears, and I mean just his fantasy outlook. Like, we know what's going on from real football. What's up with them as a fantasy dude right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is not like a organization or a situation that seems like especially fun right now, but it's that they're going against the Broncos. They actually did start to use him in designed runs last week for the first time this season. We had this weird situation last week where he wasn't really used much as a rusher to begin the season, and then they kind of realized they needed to do that. I'm hoping they have that same realization again. I particularly like him for DFS because the floor is really, really low. It might just be kind of a lost season, but the ceiling is very high. I mean, he was like a slate breaker last year, and he's not particularly expensive now. So, where the gains are really outsized in DFS, I'm willing to take on the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good dude to lead the show with because this is a pretty funky week in DFS. Starting building cash game articles and lineups this morning, there isn't a cut and dry way to build. And that will bleed over into GPPs. And it's also funky because usually we have the most popular games or the highest scoring games of the week are the most popular. And that isn't the case this week because just the way pricing works out, it's just really interesting. Before we get into it, remind everybody that we have partnered with the Solver. The Solver is the best lineup optimizer in the game. If you are already a 4for4 subscriber, just upgrade your package to the Solver subscription, monthly plan, and everything from 4for4 ownership projections, obviously fantasy projections, floor ceiling, automatically synced up to the Solver. So get you building those GPP lineups correct. And if you haven't signed up for 4for4 yet, use the promo code YouTube to get 25% off. Let's get right into it. As we've been doing every single week, going game by game, and we'll start with what should be the biggest shootout of the week, the Bills versus the Dolphins, 53.5 point over under. Bills favored by 3. Kyren, I'll start with you again. The Bills side is interesting because I mean, we got Diggs. He's the man there. Josh Allen's pretty expensive. So if you fit them together, obviously you're paying quite a premium, but obviously for an insane upside. The thing about that upside is Dolphins are really good at one thing on well, they're good at a few things, but the thing they're most known for in defense is limiting the deep ball. So kind of takes Gabe out of the mix for us a little bit. You mentioned in your write-up today that the tight ends are basically splitting time. Is James Cook the best bet after Stephon Diggs this week? And is there anything else that you're seeing in the Bills offense?
I think James Cook probably is the best bet. And I think this defense was kind of like built to stop teams like the Bills specifically. So I think you're going to have to see, like, Josh Allen is going to have to kind of matriculate the ball downfield and, take what the defense is giving him. Like, that's what the Dolphins are going to be challenging him to do the whole game. He has been very consistent, though, Josh Allen, this year, and I think he can rise to that challenge. I think James Cook will be a big part of that, not just as a receiver, but as a rusher. I was impressed looking last week at his success rate in NFL Next Gen's player tracking stats, showing that he was a little bit more consistent than he's been so far in his career as a rusher. And I think that's really important for a young running back like James Cook, that they can actually lean on him a little bit more. He's kind of doing what he's asked to do within the structure of the offense. I think that's pretty bullish for a matchup like this. So I think he's definitely very interesting this week. I also think the tight ends are kind of interesting, particularly Kincaid. This is why they drafted Kincaid, to be able to attack defenses that are going to make them do this. And so it's been kind of a little bit of a rough ride the last couple of weeks with Kincaid and the tight ends, and the snap shares and stuff have been all over the place. So, but they've not been in super competitive environments against defenses that are really built to stop kind of the classic fun Bills. And this defense is a Vic Fangio defense. It's the prototype. So I think Kincaid is also pretty interesting, but Cook, a pretty high upside way to play it.
Yeah, it's going to be tough if you're trying to game stack this game and you are on that kind of build, like Josh Allen with Diggs and maybe one of the tight ends or with James Cook. It's going to be tough to bring back one of the expensive bringbacks. Waddle's active, and obviously Tyreek is crazy expensive, but also the MVP of the league right now. But that's taking up a lot of salary. So Daigle, I want to ask you about something you and Paulson talked about on yesterday's Most Accurate podcast, and that is the Miami backfield, because obviously they go crazy last week. 70 total points. They combine for 8 touchdowns. But Mostert and Achane looks like it might be a 50-50 split, at least till Jeff Wilson comes back. The Bills defense has been a run funnel, second in schedule, adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks, 19th versus running backs. But Achane is way cheaper than Mostert on both sides, a gap between $1,200 and $1,400. So are you touching this Miami backfield this week?
I'm interested in Mostert because of the way both psychologically and peripherally Mostert pops ahead of Achane. Just the fact that he's cheaper and a rookie, those two caveats are going to make him high rostered. But Mostert is the one that gets there and has multiple ways to get there, given that he had 6 targets to Achane's 1 in the first half. He out-touched Achane 13-11, and Achane did out-carry him 10-7 in those first 2 quarters. But again, especially when we're talking about on DraftKings and the fact that he's $800 more, and Mostert's the one catching passes, I'm much more interested in that, given the significantly lower ownership I'm expecting to see, even in our projections right now. So much higher on Mostert in that department. And I think that's how they're going to attack the Bills. Mike McDaniel has an answer for everything so far. So I don't really have lacking confidence in their passing game either. But so far we saw Breece Hall, his first 2 carries went for 108 yards of the season. Don't look at what happened to Breece Hall after those first 2 carries. But the fact is, even if we remove that game, the Bills are still 31st. They've allowed the second most carries of 10-plus yards the past 2 weeks because they can't stop the run. What the hell do you think is going to happen whenever they play Mostert and Achane now? So I think Mostert, even if you're skinny stacking this game, you're not going overweight, that's the way to attack it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know how I'm attacking this game yet. Like I said, it's just a super funky week because usually the game with the 54-point total would just be crazy rostered everywhere, and we just don't have that. It's going to be Tyreek with a little bit of Diggs and a little bit of Josh Allen. I mean, even for the passing game side, Daigle, Tua and Waddle are coming in single digit right now, still haven't adjusted for the whole slate, but I don't see it moving much. This is the easiest team to double. Again, it is always expensive, but I mean, on FanDuel, if we're going to get 4% Waddle and 3% Tua, I don't know, a couple doubles might do the job, huh?
And even if you don't do doubles, I will have it written in my tournament article for everyone in the morning that I prefer Waddle in this game because it's not about rostering Tyreek Hill, who's an amazing play as he is every single week. It goes back to what are you losing out on when you roster Tyreek Hill? Because for the first time, I need to actually look this up before I'm just start spitting from my mouth. But I believe it's been a while since we've seen them so egregiously priced, like differently from one another. Whenever Waddle's the one averaging 20 yards per catch. I don't know how many times we have to simulate the slate for Waddle to match or outscore Tyreek Hill, but I'm at least willing to take those chances to save $2K in salary at a teammate who already showed even last year he could explode in their first two matchups. Everyone remembers on holiday weekend him going for 70 yards whenever they went to a run-heavy offense in Week 15 against Buffalo. So yeah, I actually prefer, given the big picture outlook of the slate, I think Waddle makes it fit a lot better, and I'm willing to take that chance over Tyreek.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Jefferson and Tyreek are getting into like old school CMC salary range on DraftKings, both of them mid 9,500 range. So, I mean, that's pretty crazy. Cash game notes on this game. Oh, go ahead, Daigle.
I also, not to mock the man in the car right now, but I also think Knox is the significantly better play over Kincaid.
Interesting.
Because I'm not sure where the Kincaid love keeps coming from outside of people just wanting to play a rookie tight end, because Knox is the one who is literally doubling his depth of target right now, 7.6 to 3.5 for Kincaid. They've run the same number of routes, and Knox as well is the one who has 3 end zone targets, tied for a team high mark compared to Kincaid's 1. So I don't know why everyone would then run to play the more rostered Kincaid.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Knox definitely looks interesting as well. And statistically, they look identical. They're running routes at the same rate. Yep. Like all the target stuff exactly the same. The reason that Kincaid jumps out to me a little bit more, and I'm not really a Kincaid guy. I didn't draft a ton of them. I thought he was way overpriced in best ball, but I know who Dawson Knox is, and there's a chance that, like, you know, it's like this is the reason that Kincaid was drafted, and he is basically just kind of a wide receiver with tight end eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
If he's going to be able to deliver on this first round draft capital and this plan that the Bills have for him, this would be one of those spots. So it's just kind of like, it's a little bit narrative, and it's a little bit just kind of taking the leap of faith with like what we know about why they drafted him. But I do agree. I mean, statistically, there's no reason to play Kincaid over Knox. And if the ownership gravitates towards Kincaid in a big way, just shifting to Knox, who I believe is $100 cheaper, right? That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, Knox is more expensive on FanDuel, but it really seems like everyone forgets we were in this position just 2 weeks ago against the Raiders. And on this very show, we called Gabe Davis and Knox as the best plays, and those were the two guys who popped. And it just seems like we're trying to do it again. We're trying to make Kincaid something or give him this role that he hasn't had for 3 games, so I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, unless he really starts to separate, I don't think we're going to be wanting to play a double-digit owned Kincaid. Just quick notes on cash games. Tyreek is a top 3 overall value at wide receiver on both sides, popping up in 83% of the optimals on FanDuel. James Cook is like right on that cash game fringe on DK at 6,300. Let's move on to the Chargers versus the Raiders in sunny Southern California, where if you look through Karane's panoramic sunroof, you can actually see that beautiful California sky. So just wanted to make sure we're all focused in on that before we move on to this game. 48.5 point over under here. Chargers favored by 5.5. So like we have this under the potential shootouts, but Raiders 5.5 point dogs is kind of on the fringe. Daigle, I'll start with you on the Chargers side. We know Keenan Allen is like the boss in this spot. I think Joshua Kelley, even though he's struggled, people I probably have him projected a little bit on ownership. The question is Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnson. Obviously, Palmer running all the routes. Like, does Quentin Johnson need more time to get acclimated, or is there something to be said here where maybe Quentin Johnson does see the field a bit more in those 3 wide receiver sets? We're seeing 3 to 4 times ownership projection for Palmer right now. So how do you see this Chargers team playing out outside of the obvious Keenan Allen smash spot?
I think the Chargers already gave us evidence whenever Mike Williams was carted off of how they're going to play this offense, because Herbert dropped back 10 times from the third quarter on through overtime. And on those 10 dropbacks, it was Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer who ran a route on 100% of the dropbacks in 2 wide sets. Quentin Johnston only came in 3 wide sets and ran 3 routes on those 10 dropbacks. I imagine that's how we see them play short term, especially with the Chargers bye in week 5. That's also going to hold out Austin Eckler in this game. It just seems like they have this 2-week window to integrate Johnston to where we get good leverage on him in week 6 based on him doing nothing in this game. It's the Raiders. They can still give up a big play here, and you can get them at significantly lower ownership if that's your theory. I'm totally fine with that. But honestly, it just seems like otherwise we're thinking ourselves into a box, thinking it's not going to be Palmer in this game because they've already shown us it's Palmer.
Yeah, knowing before I move it on to you, Pat, like knowing like what we know about Josh Palmer, like long term, we don't expect him just like completely separate, right? We expect Johnson to get there at some point in the season and start taking some snaps. In the short term, like do we like Palmer enough that we think that the offense will stay as concentrated as it was with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, or is this like, single stack Herbert with Keenan and maybe get some Joshua Kelley in there instead?
I'm relieved to hear that Palmer is going to be pretty high owned, because I don't really want to play him, and that gives me a reason not to. I don't think Palmer's really any good, and he's good enough to be out there and run the routes and do his job, but it's not going to be like it was with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. He's not a Mike Williams level talent. So I don't think I'm ready to play Johnston either. They had a chance to ramp his usage up. They really didn't. You saw, I believe, Darius Davis running some routes. Like, they'll find way. Like, if you're not ready to play a rookie, you won't play him, right? The Broncos are showing us that with Marvin Mims, unfortunately. Like,
until this week.
Until this week, hopefully, yeah. But you will learn names. If the team's not ready to, if they've got a plan in place and the rookie's not where they want to be yet, you will learn names of depth guys. And we might be doing that this week. So I'm not really. I think I just want to play it through Keenan this week. I don't really want to go to Palmer, and maybe I can be sharp and contrarian by not doing that, which is even better.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I'm a little trepidatious about Chargers doubles is because we just might not get Jimmy G and don't know what to expect if Brian Hoyer starts. This is the only game on the slate where both teams are top 10 in passing rate over expectation. But that probably changes with Hoyer. So Kyren, what do you think that means for Devontae, Jacoby, and even Josh Jacobs? I mean, this is the most concentrated offense in the league when all 3 of them are on the field.
Yeah, it's tough. Like with the walkthrough, sometimes I'll find stuff and be like, man, I can't wait to play this in DFS. And just like looking at Jacoby Myers' role and Devontae Adams' role, and then but then it's like, oh wait, this is going to be a Hoyer game. And I think I didn't want it to be as pessimistic as the write-up ended up being more pessimistic than I was hoping it would be on Brian Hoyer. But like just going back, and I basically was able to pull most of his career in, going back to 2012, looking at his stats, but it's pretty bleak. Like I think the difference between him and Jimmy Garoppolo, and I'm not really a big Garoppolo guy, but I think the difference is going to be pretty big. And I could see the Raiders trying to attack on the ground a bit more, being a little bit more conservative. You can certainly justify that against the Chargers defense, but their running game has been so inefficient this year. Josh Jacobs is still getting all the work, so he's, a very strong fantasy play, but I just don't know from like an offensive perspective, this game environment perspective. I think Hoyer really hurts it quite a bit.
Yeah, Daigle, do you think Hoyer hurts Jacobs? I mean, you can't hurt Jacobs more than he's been hurt so far, but I mean, does Jacobs have any kind of life here?
I could see people getting there. I don't know whether to blame him or his offensive line. It is a good matchup. And my issue is, yes, I'm concerned about everyone except for Devontae Adams if it is Brian Hoyer. You can search the internet for Hoyer stats, but all you need to know is that he was benched in his last 2 starts. Sometimes the easiest stat tells the entire story.
That's a great point. Cash game notes here. Keenan Allen is a top 2 value on DraftKings at 7,900. He's priced way up on FanDuel. Palmer also a top 3 value among wide receivers, priced below $5,000. Both of them are popping up in about 20 to 25% of DraftKings optimals when you use the 4 projections. All right, we don't have. Go ahead.
No. You do not move on without allowing me to talk about Josh Kelley. And then we could go from there.
Give me some Kelley.
If there were a spot, because I always listen whenever no one wants to play a player, since we're playing at tournaments. So that already psychologically checks me in and says, okay, no one's on this player. What do I need to know? But all I'm saying is the past 2 weeks, the Chargers, as we mentioned, have been 5th in pass play rate from neutral game script because they did not have Austin Eckler and they did not have Mike Williams. What happens now when they don't have Mike Williams and Austin Eckler? Are they still this pass-happy offense with Josh Palmer and 2 wide sets, especially if Brian Hoyer's under center? Or are we just trying to get this thing to the bye week? Are we becoming more of a balanced offense like they were in week 1 against the Titans where they ranked 19th in pass play rate? So all I'm saying is Kelley had 86% of the team's backfield touches last week. He hasn't earned targets. Those carries have been bad, but the Raiders are 26th in explosive run play rate. We talk about Jacob's spot. This is a Kelley spot too, theoretically.
No, I love it.
True.
Raiders in 444's first schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed of the season, the Raiders come in ranked 27th against running backs. So the spot is prime, and I think it makes a ton of sense, especially if we're going to get like a 30 to 35% Keenan Allen. It makes a ton of sense. We don't have a lot of other games that really project as shootouts. We have one that we'll get to later that is like just weird with a decent total, but all the other games kind of similar to last week. We have high team totals, but also very big spreads. And the biggest team total of the week is the 49ers. I don't know if did we completely lose Kyren or did we just lose a visual there?
He'll jump back in. He's fine. As Tyler has pointed out, he's streaming from his Tesla. He'll be okay.
All right, just making sure he's there. I'll start with the Cardinals side, then Daigle, before we get Kyren back. The Cardinals have covered the spread the last 3 weeks, as you mentioned on the podcast. This week, they're obviously or should be playing from behind as 14-point favorites. The interesting bring back on the Cardinal side is Marquise Brown, 33% target share the last 2 weeks, and then James Conner just basically all of the work. So do they have enough concentration in their offense where Marquise Brown and James Conner are both playable, even though they are going to be huge dogs, and this might be the spot where, they turn into the team we expect them to be?
It's always tough to roster a running back against the 49ers, but at least we know Marquise Brown, the past 2 games, 33% of the Arizona's targets. He's the only one getting anything that matters whatsoever. Even Rondale Moore, his 6 targets, Moore turned them into 8 yards because he has a 2-yard depth of target. He's just not getting targets where it matters and how it matters, more importantly. Now, since Marquise Brown, it was limited, he's questionable. I think he plays, and I think he's a very interesting tournament option to run back the 49ers with. I've even started tinkering with him in some optimals too. But if Marquise Brown's out, maybe I do get the Rondale Moore, because there were some reports earlier this week that they are going to continue trying to tinker with Moore as a running back, which is what he should be. And that's how he got there in fantasy last week with those 3 carries, 54 yards and a touchdown. So we'll see if Marquise Brown's out. But right now, with that target share, Brown is going to still get lost in the shuffle, because that mid-range 5K to all the way going down to Josh Palmer, to Marvin Mims, to Quentin Johnston, some of these guys are just going to get lost. And Marquise Brown is definitely one of them, despite arguably having one of the higher ceilings.
Yeah. Pat, for me, the question with the 49ers, as long as they're this team that's going to have these high point totals with big spreads, but also going to have like one of the lowest passing rates relative to expectation in the league. Yeah. The question for me every week is going to be like, obviously CMC is going to usually be in a really good spot. Like, can we stack the Niners? And if so, how do we stack them with Purdy having efficiency that's like in the Justin Herbert, Josh Allen range right now?
I mean, I think this matchup is pretty interesting for Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, Debo's looking iffy, but one of the things that jumped out when looking at the 49ers actually is like their pass block rates are not all that strong.
Mhm.
They're only 20th in ESPN's player tracking metric, pass block win rate, which shows win rate within 2.5 seconds. So are you letting up those quick pressures? Are you kind of the type of team that might let them up in the future? They're not that great there. They're letting up a lot of quick pressures. They rank dead last in quick pressures per drop back. So I want to be careful about, Ayuk, a downfield guy, against any team with a really strong pass rush, but the Cardinals don't have that. They're 31st in quick pressures per drop back, 24th in pass block win rate. So Purdy should be able to, operate this offense and look downfield if targets are condensed with Samuel out or not fully healthy. I think Ayuk's pretty interesting. And if I'm worried about passing volume, a guy who has a downfield role is certainly more interesting than, someone who's more volume dependent. So I think Ayuk's a good way to play it.
Daigle, you
Right
have a
now-
take on the 49ers?
Oh, lots. Right now, you said Christian McCaffrey is an optimal cash game play, correct? It's only Friday. We'll figure out for everyone in the Discord, but right now that's how it looks.
Oddly enough, he is showing up in way more DraftKings optimals, which is weird because usually players that are so expensive are hard to get in there. The reason I think is happening is because we have a lot of punt wide receivers on DraftKings, so it works. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
And I always worry when the cash game lineup particularly trickles down into tournaments, but I don't think he's going to be rostered much or relative to what he should be in tournaments. Yes, the 49ers are 14-point favorites, but as you mentioned, the highest team total by a wide margin on this entire slate. And the Cardinals have covered the spread in their first 3 games because they're frisky. They hang around. And if that's the case and we get some ambiguous volume here, man, like 49ers doubles look really good. Just soaking up, as we talked about in that 49ers Ram game a couple weeks ago when Brock Purdy took down the Millie Maker with a double stack and overall game onslaught with 5 players. It seems like maybe that's a situation again in this week.
Yeah, if you have a take on the expensive guys, I think you just ride that take. We have Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, and Justin Jefferson, all with very high salaries. So I think they cannibalize each other a bit because they're on pretty good spots. And on FanDuel, you could throw Keenan Allen in there too. He's priced up with those guys, but I don't think that's going to have people shying away from him. So I don't think any of their ownerships get out of control because you can't play all of them together, right? On FanDuel, you could play a couple. But I think those expensive guys cannibalize each other's ownerships a bit. And I'd be very surprised I have to run the numbers again, but I'd be surprised to see any of them get to 25%, say.
And shout out for Patty Millions, because I will tell you, I've been in the battle royale streets, backdoor double stacking the Niners with Ayuk, Kittle, and Purdy, and it's hot. No one's doing it, and it's hot.
Yeah, this is going to be a very important week to track ownership because between now and Sunday, what happens with Debo, I think is going to have the biggest effect on Ayuk. Like Kittle's already a little bit popular on FanDuel, probably get super steamed on DK if or when Debo is out. Ayuk's the interesting one. If Ayuk stays like at 5%, even though Debo's out, I mean, it's going to be pretty hot.
Especially because Juwan Jennings has already been ruled out. Like, yes,
Good
Ronnie
point.
Bell will logically step in, but he's not going to earn Ayuk target share. It still trickles to the best player. So Ayuk Kittle, man, that's fun this week.
Yeah, I mean, let's ride. Keep in mind that is the latest start of the day. 3 late games, NFL just killing us again, but that gives us maximum late swappability. So if you do build those doubles, we should have a pretty good idea of how owned these guys are going to be. So that helps a lot for us. And obviously people might be nervous because we might not get Debo news until 3:30 p.m. So that's
a great
even
point.
more
And
interesting.
I don't mind having Ayuk if Debo's active. Like, it's not an Ayuk misses play for me.
Sure.
Obviously it helps, but I think if you end up playing Ayuk and Debo's out there, I mean, you'll have a very low owned Ayuk, I think.
I still
I dig
like McCaffrey a lot, which hot take, I know, but the way structure is built this week, I think everyone's going to kind of lose McCaffrey based on what he should be rostered because everyone's already talking about Miles Sanders, Raheem Mostert, Achane, Zach Moss, Kyren Williams. Everyone's kind of sticking around that 5,800 to 6,500 range. And so I do wonder if a pay-up running back gets lost. So if that's the case, maybe I do instead stick with McCaffrey and double stacks, since we know you can absolutely do that with Purdy. Or just trying to soak up, as we talked about last week for the Dolphins, you didn't need Tua to take down tournaments. Mostert and Tyreek Hill got there because you soaked up their touchdowns. Maybe we can do that with McCaffrey and Kittle too. But it's definitely something, those three guys, Kittle, McCaffrey, and Ayuk, I'm just going to figure it out after injury news and start playing with it.
Speaking of those mid-tier running backs, Daigle, I think one of the most interesting ones this week is DeAndre Swift. We got the Eagles for the next game. They're favored by 9 over the Commanders in a game with only 43.5 point total. But as favorites, the Eagles have a nice 26.25 team total. As you mentioned on the podcast, DeAndre Swift, 76% share, touch share in week 2. Last week through 3 quarters, that share was 74%. We're going to get all the ownership on those guys that you just mentioned. I think we get maybe a little bit of ownership on the Eagles passing game, but not a lot. So where are you at on this one? Because I think we got 2 really good spots here. We got DeAndre Swift that should be moderately owned. And then if you read Matt Savoca's breakout wide receiver article, AJ Brown's like the number 1 buy low candidate in football right now. So how do you see this Eagles game playing out?
It's one I've been watching the market on all week, because although the Eagles made Baker Mayfield look like vintage Baker Mayfield, the fact is in weeks 1 and 2, both Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins finished as the QB2 in fantasy. They averaged 49 pass attempts per game and had success because the Eagles secondary is quietly a pass funnel. They are not good. Jalen Carter is basically the only person helping that defense out right now. And so maybe that's all that matters against Sam Howell, the only quarterback taking a sack rate over 13%, and he's at 16% in the league. Maybe Jalen Carter cancels out the offense. But I have this weird vibes I'm getting from this game, especially because Washington competed with them last year. And so if that's the case, if they are sticking around, we have seen Swift, although he's been very successful on the ground and getting all the work, he's also not used in the passing game whatsoever. It's still pretty much trickling. Although Zacchaeus had success, it's still trickling to Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. So certainly something I'm watching. I don't know how we would get there on Washington's side. We probably don't even need to. We're really just talking about, can you trust rostering a Philadelphia wide receiver? And I really think you can, because based on what they showed at least through the first 2 games before playing Tampa, you can have success through the air here with splash plays.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of having success through the air, surprisingly, Pat, Sam Howell is projecting as one of 444's best values on DK. He's actually in the DraftKings optimal. I'm not writing him up on in the cash game article. I'm going against.
I need to throw in a million,
which often fails me. But is he in a bounce back spot against the Eagles for the reasons that Daigle mentioned?
I don't really like this spot for Howell. And I'm not really a Howell guy. So, maybe this is just bias, but I think like it reminds me a little bit of, Justin Fields getting pushed by the Chiefs or something. It's like, I don't want Justin Fields to be forced to pass all the time, and be like, in suboptimal situations where the defense knows what's coming and then he's got to do it, right? Like Sam Howell, he's got that sack issue that Daigle mentioned. It's not even, I think that maybe even understates it. Like anytime there's pressure, he's going down. Like that's the problem is it's pressure to sack rate with him. He's at 40%. Ryan Tannehill's at 35%. Jameis Winston's at 33. Derek Carr's at 31. No one else is even above 30 in pressure to sack rate. Like if you get to Howell, you're taking him to the ground. It's a real problem. It's a problem for the offense. It's going to put them in, like long third downs. They're going to have trouble converting first downs. Like I'm not convinced that Howell can bounce back here against an Eagles pass rush that isn't great, but neither is the Bills. Like this was the first test last week that we had for Howell against a like legit defense, maybe not a great defense, but a legit one. He did not perform well. Wasn't quite as bad as he looked on paper with all the interceptions and stuff. He throws an interception at the very end of the game that, they were going to lose anyway. Who cares? But I do think that the big red flag coming in with Howell into the league was this sack issue.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons that I was skeptical of him holding on to this job all year. And really the first time that he might kind of like flame out in the game, he did. And so I'm not really looking to go back to him here. I can see the case, you know, the Eagles are going to be putting up points. Maybe this game's fun, but I think I'm going to sit it out.
Yeah, I'm pretty nervous about the Washington side. I mean, I think one of my leaks in my game is just overlooking games like this where like we have way better game environments. We have teams with way higher totals, but like when you have this great Eagles offense and their total is 26.25, I think we should at least be looking at this game and remembering that these are the kind of games that could still win it for us. I mean, to Pat's note, with Howell, we were at least hoping we were getting this mobile quarterback that would give us like at least in the 25 to 35 yards on the ground game. He's not giving us that at all. If you're going to miss on a 17th round quarterback, but so much for Howell being that mobile guy. We were hoping for. Moving on to the only other team with a total above 25, the Vikings are favored by 4.5 with a total of 25.5 at the Panthers with a game total of 46.5. Pat, you mentioned in your article this morning that you think this could be a surprise run-heavy game plan for the Vikings. Why do you think that? And if that happens, do we think that Madison might have a shorter leash than we've seen so far this year with Akers being active?
I mean, he probably has a bit of a shorter leash, but I don't know like that Akers is really going to have the opportunity to like take the job. Like his Akers has been so inefficient this year. The reason that I think the Vikings probably will be more balanced, and I don't think they'll be truly run heavy, but I think they'll be like maybe a slight lean to the run. The reason I feel that way is that last year they did have 6 games where they operated very balanced. So the pass rate were expected between -1, 0, or 1, right? They basically were running as much as you would expect them to. And they did that in wins over non-playoff teams. That's where all those games showed up as. I think that they have that kind of gear to their offense. One reason that I think that too is that the Vikings have been passing a lot this year. They passed a lot last year, but typically they did so in games that were shootouts or where they were trailing, where they had to pass. They're not a team they're not like the Falcons where a team's beating up on them and they're just like, we run the ball. That's who we are. Like they're fine. They need to drop back a bunch of times and play a shootout. They'll happily do it. But in a game like this, I don't think that they are like, Joe Burrow when he's healthy Bengals, the Chiefs, right? Teams that kind of say we win through the pass and we're going to come in and be really pass heavy no matter what. I don't really think that's who the Vikings are. And so I think they might play a little tighter than we would expect here. Doesn't necessarily make me all that interested in Madison, but it probably has me breaking ties against Jefferson. And as we're thinking through how do we play the high price guys this week. Yeah.
I mean, and to Crane's point, like if the Vikings do need to be pushed for us to see them get there both on the ground and through the air, we probably would have liked it to happen with Andy Dalton. Unfortunately, especially for Daigle and his hopeful overbets that he was going to have, it looks like it's going to be Bryce Young. We already got, we now have a questionable tag on Miles Sanders, so who was projecting as one of the better values of the week early in the week. Now we have to wait and see. Even with the Bryce Young news that he's likely active, we still have Adam Thielen projecting as a pretty good value. Jonathan Mingo looks like he's trending towards not playing. Daigle, from your opinion, does Bryce Young just disintegrate Adam Thielen's value or this value, the value of this game altogether?
Well, Young did play that entire game in week 2, and Thielen still led the team with 9 targets, had 20 PPR points from Young because he scored that touchdown with 7 catches and 45 yards. I think the interesting play, though, for me from Young is still DJ Chark, assuming that Jonathan Mingo is out with concussion. We'll have to take this one down to the wire. I do personally wish Dalton wins this game because if so, then I would even have Dalton in my player pool. But we at least know Brian Flores is going to blitz the hell out of Bryce Young because that's what he's done at a top 2 rate in every game so far. They're not even trying to hide what they have to do on defense. And Young's only been blitzed on 10 dropbacks so far this year. We don't know much, but his depth of target has doubled against the blitz. Not to mention that if we don't have Mingo, at least we saw in week 2 from Young, Mingo with Chark active still earned 8 targets, just one behind Thielen's team high mark that I mentioned earlier. And so if Chark is stepping into that role and still leading the team in routes run, he's the kind of player at that low salary I don't mind taking chances on because he does get over 100 yards or even 80 yards with a touchdown and gets us there at value at a point per dollar mark, 20% of the time. And on DraftKings in particular, he's the same price as Josh Palmer. It's camouflage. So either way, whether Dalton plays or not, I think I do like Chark quite a bit in this tournament slate.
Yeah, just the practice notes on the Panthers. Jonathan Mingo has been limited practice all week through Friday. Miles Sanders limited practice Wednesday, Thursday, downgraded to DNP on Friday. So that's always concerning. Coaches, talking about him, playing, hopefully, obviously questionable tag, not doubtful, but downgraded DNP. Is always quite concerning. Justin Jefferson, as far as cash games go, he's a top 4 overall value on FanDuel. I don't think you could play him over Tyreek and Christian McCaffrey on DK. It's just you have to pick one. On FanDuel, you could usually afford 2 expensive guys. So I guess it makes more sense there, but still, I think he's pretty far behind Tyreek and CMC in terms of the expensive guys. Thielen is the most rostered players in DraftKings optimals if you build on the solver right now. So I think we probably just take that punt value, that sub 5K value, and hope for the best. Guys, after these games we mentioned, the rest of the games aren't bad. They're just kind of funky. We got Broncos and Bears, which obviously horrible defenses, but also offensives. Well, Broncos offenses hasn't been horrible, but we could say wide range of outcomes. Rams and Colts isn't projecting crazy well, at least from a point perspective, but we have a ton of values in that game. There might be a lot of chalk. Cowboys are big favorites, but that's kind of a gross game. Bengals are playing pass funnel Titans, which I think is interesting, but no one's talking about. So does anything, I'll start with you, Daigle. Does anything pop to you from the remaining games that we haven't covered?
Broncos, Bears. We already teased it at the front. Pat's interested in the Bears side. I'm really interested in the Russ side. The only thing is, I think these most recent injuries in the Bears secondary are going to steam Russell Wilson quite a bit. He may even end
on
up
DK.
Being on DK.
He's much cheaper on DK. On FanDuel, he's not that cheap. So
he's still totally viable there because his double stack is Marvin Mims and Cortland Sutton, if you even get there. But Cortland Sutton, even if Jerry Jeudy were to play, Judy's still very clearly banged up. The last 2 games, Sutton has seen 28.2% of the team's targets. Judy's not even a player we're thinking about. And after a 50-point loss, after Cortland Sutton fumbles twice, Brandon Johnson has 2 holding penalties that take 2 touchdowns off the board, you have to think a change is coming. And even if we luck box into 70 yards and a touchdown because a change doesn't come for Mims, he's still a player we need to be ahead on and the same salary as Josh Palmer. So Russell Wilson right now, he's getting hate because of the team's defense, but no one's paying attention that Russ is the QB8 in points per game. He's been awesome this year. He's been awesome the last 5 games since Nathaniel Hackett was fired. There is no reason to not to consider him a QB1 and a top 6 option, honestly, in this slate. So Russ at 5,800 on DraftKings at a mid price where it gets lost on FanDuel. Man, those double stacks look really good.
Yeah, Javonte's projecting really well on both sides, but he'll actually kind of be chalky. I don't really want chalky Javonte.
That's the other pivot. Yes, it's because Russ is fun because Javonte, who has been very efficient, I'm pretty sure because he's still obviously recovering like Breece Hall from that torn ACL. That's why Russ also makes a lot of sense in this slate.
Bears also one of 8 teams allowing at least 9 yards per target to players lined up in the slot. Cortland Sutton leads the Broncos with 70 routes run from the slot this year. So to Daigle's point, Sutton is in a good spot there. Pat, you kind of already talked about the Bears a little bit, but anything else about these fringe games that we haven't mentioned yet?
I really like that from the Broncos side there, especially with the Russ pricing. And I think one thing about the Bears defense is that even last year, I felt like people were too focused on the fact they couldn't stop the run because they also couldn't stop the pass. And this year they've been a little bit better against the run, and they are still terrible against the pass. So I think that's pretty interesting. And yeah, I think Russ has been pretty good this year. So I might play that game from both sides. I'll have to see. But the other game that jumps out a little bit is the Rams and the Colts. Specifically, like, it's kind of one of those, I don't want to play Javonte either, which makes me interested in the Broncos passing game a little bit more. If Kyren Williams is going to be a massive chalk, then can we go to Puka Nacua if he's not going to be
Puka's going to be on too.
No.
That's why I think this game. That's why I think this game is really weird, because like the point projection is middling, but we have 4 players that could be like 15 to 20%.
When Davis is talking about a game, Pat, it's going to be over rostered. Davis loves the Colts and the Rams, so just ignore that game.
All right.
So then is it a Michael Pittman game then? If we're getting popular Zach Moss, popular Anthony Richardson, popular Rams, and no one's going to play Michael Pittman, do we pay in like a funky salary range?
I still kind of think Zach Moss gets lost behind Kyren Williams. I don't think people roster Zach Moss to the point where he's a 30 touchback. The past 2 games, he's handled 84% and 100% of their backfield touches, 32 of 38 just last week. And if there were a game where Anthony Richardson doesn't get banged up and get the carries through the trenches inside the 5-yard line, you would think it's his first one back from a concussion. So I still like Zach Moss as a pivot off that entire game, just trying to soak up everything.
I like that. Yeah. It's a shame we can't play Puka. He
is
really
Stafford
pops.
Just an absolutely insane play?
It's not insane. I came into the week thinking, because it's so concentrated there, it's basically only Puka and Tutu. Like, Higbee did pop up for those 70 receiving yards last week, but he was still 4th on the team in targets. Like, he's still a player we can't play. And so I don't think it's insane. I still like Tutu over Puka if we're trying to get leverage off the spot, because I do think Puka will be high rostered. Something Sharp Football's
Tutu's actually probably the best play of the game, now that I think
he's an amazing play. He's in my tournament article for sure. Sharp Football's Rich Rebar pointed out to me, and I didn't see it at all. And it's still so early that it may mean nothing. But last week was really the first time that Puka dealt with the majority man coverage and getting pressed at the line of scrimmage. Yeah. And so I think we have like maybe a trend to watch out for, saying that's why he struggled. Now, Puka struggling is a 21% target share with 70 receiving yards. That's pretty awesome. That's okay. But the Colts have shown that they are willing to shift their defense. They played over 75% from zone coverage in weeks 1 and 2, and then were completely balanced at 50-50 in week 3. So if they are willing to go balanced and playing man coverage against Puka, who's, again, very, very early, but he's seen 15% of his targets against man coverage, and he's averaged over 2 yards per route run fewer against man coverage. If the Colts are going to play like that, then that at least is me poking holes and playing Puka at high roster.
Yeah, I will say, even though the game is projecting for a very low total, Titans have been the most obvious pass funnel in the league, and even on a struggling calf, we saw the Bengals still let Burrow throw it 50 some odd times last week. Jamar Chase is going to draw some ownership. The Titans are allowing the 6th most yards per attempt to players in the slot. Tyler Boyd leads all players in routes run from the slot. He's going to be 1% owned, while Jamar is going to be like 15 to 16. And Boyd is also a price pivot off of 3 players in the sub 4,500 range that are going to be 15 to 20%. So, I mean, if you're playing the Millie and you just, like a price pivot, 4K guy, I think you could do worse than Tyler Boyd. 20% target share or more in the last 2 games. Go ahead, Daigle.
I still want to be over the field on Jamar Chase, because we're all trying to parse through Tyreek, Diggs, Devontae, Chase, and Jefferson to a lesser extent. Jefferson's definitely going to get lost just because you lose so much in your lineup if you play him, because he's so expensive. But Chase, you talk about the slot and the Titans allowing the 4th most receiving yards per game, 126 to slot receivers. But we've seen Chase now is 4th in the league in slot catches. He's being used in the slot at the highest rate of his career. So he's actually their slot receiver, getting peppered these dinky targets from Joe Burrow, who is very clearly not healthy. But against the Titans, you can get there on 12 to 15 targets easily if you're Jamar Chase. So I still think I want to be over the field on Chase.
I'm completely okay with that. Yeah, I kind of like the Bengals. Let's let's talk about the chalk players right here. We had Miles Sanders listed, but he's a questionable tag now. The players with the biggest ownership projections right now: Keenan Allen, Kyren Williams, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase. I think I'm probably a little too high on Browns defense and Pat Freiermuth. Pat, any like easy plays or fades for you in among these chalk players?
The easy one for me would be Pat Freiermuth. I think, Kenny Pickett, he definitely showed something last week, but I'm still a little bit skeptical of, the Raiders are such an easy matchup, and he was good. He wasn't great, and he's not really going to Freiermuth. I mean, Freiermuth is not – Deontay Johnson's not out there, right? Targets have opened up, and we're looking at a 12% targets per route run this year for Pat Freiermuth. He's also not been able to run all the routes, but that was mostly due to being banged up with that chest injury in week 1. But even when he's out there, so, you'd think like, oh, when they go to the per route numbers, that'll look pretty good. No, the per route numbers look terrible. He's got a 0.6 yards per route run, which is horrendous. I couldn't be happier to I would love the ownership to come in as high as it could be on Freiermuth. I'll be elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. If Freiermuth, I mean, he's in my cash game article, but I mean, 18% Freiermuth is like the easiest fade of all time. Daigle, anyone you like or love that's chalk this week? Hate or love? Sorry.
Did I have anyone written down? No.
No.
Christian McCaffrey, we talked about.
Yeah, he's going to be chalky for sure.
Keenan Allen will be chalky. For as good as Tyreek Hill has been, Keenan Allen leads all wide receivers in points per game. Keenan Allen's been better. I think that is forgotten by people. And he's still, you could argue, $7,900 on DraftKings. His price on FanDuel isn't expensive enough given his role, especially without Josh Palmer. So, I could see myself like Charger stacking even without Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen.
Yeah, on DK, Keenan's so much cheaper than the elite wide receivers. Like he'll probably crack 30% this week. But I mean, we saw last week in tournaments, like team play the best plays can get there. We're allowed to play 30% guys. Like it's not bad. You just play them intelligently. There's lots of ways to get unique and offset that ownership. Pay attention to product ownership, pay attention to some ownership. Make sure you have a couple, low owned guys, depending on the size of your tournament. Pay attention to the size of your tournament. You could play Keenan Allen. And if you're playing small field stuff, remember, if you're playing in a 100 man, all it takes is 5 or 6 guys to not play him because he's going to be chalk for that number to swing crazy. So I like Keenan Allen as mega chalk. I'm fine with it.
Even Josh Palmer, I've been toying around with some optimizers, and he does bring back, like he has a good ROI simulation for mid to high stakes single entries, but then it obviously tanks in large field. So it tells you can play 30% Josh Palmer into 1,500 person fields, 1,000 person fields. But when you go in the millie, you cannot do that because his ceiling, if you simulate this slate, it's just not there most of the time.
Yeah, don't play 30% Josh Palmer in the millie. Before we get to our favorite plays of the weeks, I want to remind everybody about a spot that we've been actually absolutely smashing on this podcast. 3 for 3 to start the season with our Prize Picks plays. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Before you set your lineup, go to prizepicks.com/DFSMVP and use code DFSMVP for a first deposit match up to $100. It's important to do that before the podcast because when we play these plays, you want to be able to get them before those numbers are stale. For week 4, got 3 picks that we're really liking, and we've talked about all of them already here. Sam Howell's rushing number is at 14.5. Like him for less than 14.5 yards. Has been under that twice this year, as Kyren mentioned. He's just going down when you go after him. So like fading that there. James Cook, 18.5 receiving yards. Liking him for more there. Lots of checkdowns, as we mentioned in that game. Tons of receiving upside for James Cook. And Javonte Williams facing one of the worst defenses in the league. 51.5 rush yards. We like him for more there. $25 on those 3 player pick'ems will 5x your money. Go to prizepicks.com/DFSMVP. Use the code DFSMVP for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, boys, let's get to everyone's favorite part of the show, just the plays we like the most. Pat, start with you at quarterback. I'll give it away a little bit. Your cover boy for the walkthrough. You guys need to sign up for the walkthrough if you're not reading it already.
Yeah, Justin Fields. I'm excited about him. It doesn't seem like when I decide on the cover boy, the walkthrough, it's not really like a DFS thing of like, oh, he's going to be low owned and I'm going to be able to play him. Like, it's just like a spot that I like. And this is one of those spots that I think is really great for, I mean, basically anyone who's going to be playing the Broncos all season. I mean, we're going to be targeting this defense, but specifically like speed, right? Like, we know how they lost last week was they are very susceptible to speed, to rushing speed. Sounds like a good week for Justin Fields to be able to rebound a little bit here. He doesn't have to like rebound in, he doesn't suddenly have to get way better at reading defenses and hitting his reads and, going through his progressions and everything. He can just go out there and play football a little bit. But also when he does go through his progressions, he's probably going to find some open guys because this defense is quite poor against the pass as well as the run. I don't think he's going to be super chalky, it looks like. So I will definitely have some of him. How do you play it in DFS? I don't know that I'm going to want to stack him with DJ Moore. I don't really love that. I have been like toying with, do I want to stack him with Cole Kmet? I do think I want to play Marvin Mims in some of this stuff. And maybe it's like a naked field with a Mims type of thing. Is that too weird?
I mean, we saw the Sunday Million winner last week go quarterback opposing wide receiver with no stacked wide receiver. So I mean, that's kind of how it's been done. Naked quarterback doesn't win a lot, but also that's probably a function of a lot of people not playing naked quarterbacks. So I mean, if there's a guy to play naked, it's Justin Fields.
I think if you're going to stack it, to me, it's probably with Kmet and just get tight end taken care of because tight end's hard to take care of this week.
That's why it is, because you're just trying to get tight end out of the way. Especially this week, tight end is uglier than ever.
It's really ugly.
Daigle, tell me about your quarterback real quick.
I like the other side of the ball. I will have an update for everyone because that's what it's going to come down to is if Russ gets whittled down to be the cash game quarterback, ownership may be too high, but I need to have an update for everyone during the Discord chat on Sunday morning because I need to see if the field gets to Cortland Sutton. I need to see if the field gets to Marvin Mims taking a chance there, because if so, we're still getting leverage on Russ. I don't even want a run back. You can play Fields for sure and play Broncos receivers, but I don't think we need the Bears offense for Russ to still get there, especially after a 50-point trouncing. So I do love the Broncos passing game.
We will definitely be talking about that one Discord on Sunday morning. If we're looking at cash games, Anthony Richardson at 7,600 FanDuel, 6,700 DK is just like the most obvious cash quarterback of the week. I mean, you could throw Justin Fields in there like Kyren was mentioning, but Richardson has shown us probably the best floor in football right now. Priced as the QB7 on both sites. He's projecting as the QB3. He is our top FanDuel value at quarterback. So I'm definitely rocking him. Crane, who's your top running back this week? We actually haven't even talked about this game at all, so I'm glad you brought this guy up.
Yeah, so Daigle earlier talked about Christian McCaffrey and how we're probably seeing people live in this, like 5K range on DraftKings, 5-6K range, and it's gonna be tough to go right if you're going up. Like, let me go up and get Tyreek in here, right? I don't know that people are going to want to go figure out ways to include Tony Pollard, who has been disappointing. But Tony Pollard's expected points per game, this using PFF's model, is at 23.5 points per game. That is wildly good. And they're in a game situation where they should be able to run as much as they want. I think we're looking at a Patriots team that's going to be running against them plenty. And honestly, I think the Cowboys are probably overly conservative. They've been pass first to pass heavy in every single game this season, including last week's, which is kind of weird since they were getting upset by the Cardinals, but that's what they did. So I'm kind of worried, I guess, about what this team's doing, but I think Tony Pollard is going to get a ton of work, and he's really good. He hasn't been good this year, but I mean, I've been betting on this guy for 3 years. I'm not going to stop after a few inefficient bad games when he finally has the workload.
Yeah, among players that have played all 3 games this year, Tony Pollard leads the league with 24.5 touches per game. He is ranked as a top 2 value across all positions on both sides on the 4for4 value report. Daigle, we talked about this guy a little bit. Who's your favorite running back of the week?
I don't know if I want to call him my favorite, but who
All
do
right.
I like in
Who's
tournaments?
the running back you put in the sheet this week?
Cheap ass Josh Kelley is there, and no one's going to play him. And there's enough reasons to think that the game script allows him to be featured. Austin Eckler moved to doubtful. We know their bye is next week. He's not going to play. He makes a lot of things fit as a cheap running back who's going to see a majority of the touches. What he'll do with those, I don't know. But I think I'm willing to take it on one more time since no one else is.
Yeah, how about Josh Kelley and Keenan Allen getting there together, a little running back receiver stack. Yeah, we don't talk about them enough, but they show up in almost every single winning lineup, either on the Sunday Million or the Millionaire. A running back same team stack is so prevalent, and people just don't talk about them a lot.
He had 96 yards and a touchdown in week 1. He was right there. Like, it could happen 3 weeks later. It could definitely happen.
TJ, are you talking like Herbert, Kelley, Allen, or
I'm talking
just,
Allen, Kelley,
Kelley?
to just Allen and Kelley together. No Herbert. Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, I played with it. Don't worry.
Yeah. I think
I
it's a
like
great
that.
play. Yeah.
I think Kelley's a very good play. As much as I want to joke that he's going to do terrible again, but
I mean, he could.
Good play.
But
yeah.
Well, if he does, we don't have to worry about it because they're in a bye in week 5, and we'll never have to talk about Kelley again because Eckler will be smashing. The cash game quarterback of the week is Kyren Williams, 7,600 FanDuel, $6,000 DraftKings. Did see a salary increase, but still not enough to take care of the fact that he is the only player with at least 90% of his backfield touches over the last 2 weeks. We have him as a top 4 running back value on DraftKings. He is in the cash game article and probably lock buttoned on our cash game lineups. Let's stick in that game and talk about a receiver you like, Pat, who we touched on a little bit earlier.
Well, you guys made me feel a little bit worse about this one, but I like Puka Nacua a lot.
He's a great play. He's just going to be owned. He's a fantastic play.
Okay. Yeah. Nacua, when I looked at this matchup with the pass rush here, I felt like this is going to be a spot where I think the Rams are going to be focused on getting the ball out quickly, and Nacua has a couple advantages over Tutu if that's the goal. His average depth of target is only 8.5, whereas Tutu's at 13. Tutu's been a deep threat downfield. Nacua, much more of a shallow target guy, and he's seeing a lot more first read targets. So, if Stafford's if you're looking for a guy to be, getting out of his breaks quickly, more intermediate to shallow part of the field, and Stafford's looking at him first, that's going to help you get the ball out of your hands quickly. The Rams passing, their pass blocking is starting to look like a major concern, and they're going against the Colts defense that actually does have a pretty good pass rush. So if we're looking at the Rams, I think that there could be a reason to see a pretty run heavy game, and maybe the Kyren chalk gets there. But it seems like, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the Kyren stuff is what could really get out of hand as opposed to people playing Tutu. You guys feel that way or not?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Cash game running back. Yeah, he's going to get trickled in a lot.
Yeah. Despite that good pass rush, Colts still 27th in schedule adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. So Puka set up nicely there. Daigle, tell us which receiver you like.
I talked about DJ Chark earlier, and I think he is a good option for large field tournaments since, again, Josh Palmer is pretty much the same price. And I don't know how many times we have to run this slate, but Chark has to outscore Palmer at least 30-40% of the time, just given the way Chark is used. Even last week, I know it was from Dalton, not Bryce Young, but Chark still tied for the league lead in targets 20 yards downfield with 5. The way he is used breaks the slate if he hits. So I like Chark quite a bit in large field.
If Joshua Palmer comes in at 25%, I'm just looking for every way to get leverage off that, whether it's salary pivots or players on the Chargers or just fading the Chargers. I don't know. I'm not playing 25. I don't care.
It's better. He's better than, because people are trying to jam in some slot receivers in those low 3Ks, like a Josh Downs. I like Josh Downs in redraft, but in DFS, Josh Downs just doesn't get there because he's not that kind of player and he's not running those kind of routes. So I'd just rather go up a little bit and get the guys running go routes.
Right, and that's why I mentioned Tyler Boyd specifically, because he will give us some of those high A targets.
He
Every
plays
once
with
in a
Joe
while.
Burrow.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
helps too. On DraftKings specifically, I'm hitting the lock button on Keenan Allen and cash. On FanDuel, he's 9,500, but he still projects very well. But down 7,900 on DK, I think you have to hit the lock button on him. 33% target share on the year. When we saw Mike Williams go out last week, that spiked to 42%. Fourth most routes from the slot does Keenan Allen have. The Raiders allow the seventh most yards per attempt to players lined up in the slot. He is our wide receiver two in terms of DraftKings value at 4 for 4. Daigle, give us a tight end you're liking.
None of them, but I do think
it is gross in these tight ends.
It's a bad one. It's a really bad one. Even the tournament article, I have 3 written down. I'm like, I'm just going to stick with these 3 guys. But one of those guys is Dawson Knox. I like Dawson Knox over Kincaid. I will call my shot, although I called Matt Collins' shot, and it didn't feel too bad, honestly, because no Falcon got there. It wasn't just Matt Collins. It was everyone, so that's okay. But I do like Dawson Knox for all the reasons mentioned earlier, running the same amount of routes, earning more targets, and his targets are more potent and inducive for fantasy points than Kincaid's to this point.
Speaking of a very gross tight end slate, I mean,
this
talk
is,
to me, Kyren.
I don't even hate
Kyren.
it, but this is not Julian Hill. I'll say that.
Well, look, I mean, I was thinking Kincaid, and then Daigle just like won that debate, so I had to move off that. And it's like, all right, well, this is so gross, right? And like, I would like to be able to build differently. I don't want to have to hang out in the Kyren Williams chalk zone, right? I want to go up and get Tony Pollard and build a little bit of a different lineup than everyone else this week. Maybe I go down to Tanner Hudson and just save as much salary as humanly possible. I'm getting the Joe Burrows a little bit healthier than we are hoping, or than we were, are fearing, type of upside that you're getting a much better version of with Jamar Chase or even Tyler Boyd. But he just kind of allows me to maybe fit some guys in. And who am I fading? Right? Like,
that's very true. Who are you fading? That is a great point.
At that price, you're basically just playing him over Julian Hill, as I mentioned, who ran the second most routes for the Dolphins last week. But it seems like no matter what the Dolphins do at tight end, Mike McDaniel is still just feeding the targets to the best players. Like anyone, I know Craycraft got injured, but anyone with Craycraft wasn't going to get there anyways. Like Tyreek got 39% of the targets, and the running backs combined for 39% of the targets. That's where the ball goes. You don't get the ball if you're not good. So
I would also
Tanner
say
Hudson over Julian Hill, yes.
Julian Hill, I think, played more because Durham Smythe was dealing with an injury last week. And then McDaniel mentioned that Hill was like in on some packages that they liked for that game. So like Hill could, like, I think, I'm dropping Smythe in my high stakes stuff, churning him out. But I don't really trust the Hill routes from last week. I think they could come way down. Whereas Hudson seems like, he'll be out there 60% of the time.
I only mention him because people will get there. They'll get to a Stoneman tight end playing with the Dolphins running the routes now, and they'll naturally just try to bring him along in the highest projected scoring game of the week. And that's why I'm saying Hudson over Hill for sure.
Wait, you're saying people are going to get to a Stoneman tight end this week?
I think they would get to Hill if they're trying to get cute. Not a lot of people, but that's where they'll go. They'll drop down from Chig and Knox and instead go to Stoneman, Julian Hill.
Okay, because I was going to say to actually support what Crane was saying in terms of like, who are you fading at tight end? I will say, especially on DraftKings, we never want to take a zero per se, but completely punting a salary, especially at tight end, just to get up to another stud. The ceiling of that play is a lot higher than taking like a mid tight end and just forcing in some other mid player. Like if Hudson gets you to, like, I don't know if it works, but just for example, Tyreek, CMC, and Jamar, when no one else can fit 3 studs, like that makes it worth it. That makes the ceiling of your lineup way higher. So I think people sometimes are really, really scared to really punt, to do a true punt, because like you might just be taking 2 points, but guess what? People win milli makers with zeros in their lineups. So just some food for thought when you're building. For cash games, I usually hate living in this range. But like the only true reliable guy we have this week is George Kittle. 6,300 FanDuel, like that's usually okay, but this 5,100 salary on DK is always really gross. The salaries are just really funky this week on DraftKings, and there's a lot of 4 wide receiver builds in the optimal, which is not something we do a lot in cash. So Kittle might work on both sides. Deebo Samuel may be out. George Kittle third in target share going into the week at tight end with 21%. We saw him with 27 last week, while Ayuk was out. Arizona is last in schedule as just points allowed to quarterback. So hopefully we get some trickle down to Kittle there. We have him as a top 2 value on both sides, the top tight end on FanDuel.
As Kyren would know, because he won $2 million because Deebo Samuel got injured. In the 4 games that Deebo was out last year, Kittle, 24% target share, 16.6 PPR points per game, led the league in scoring touchdowns in that stretch.
He had a decent little run in the fantasy playoffs, to say the least.
I don't know how you don't fit him in if Deebo's ruled out. I don't know how I get off him. Even at, let's say it's 60%. It's not going to get there. I don't know how you do not play him if Deebo's ruled out.
But how are you building? Because are you just hoping we'll have like clarity before the 1 p.m. kickoff?
Maybe you build it in since we haven't. Deebo was DNP on today, right?
The good
or limited.
He went to limited today. DNP Wednesday, Thursday, limited today.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say if you're building with Kittle late, just have another player in the flex. Have another late player in the flex and have some double and just think about some double swaps late. Was that your question, Crane? Like, how are you building since he's late?
It sounds like Daigle's trying to do 49ers doubles, which I like, but but I guess you could just take it to a single if Deebo goes and
right, exactly, yeah. You'll just have some funky doubles. You'll probably you'll end up with a gross tight end, but
one more question before we get out of here too, because Miles Sanders downgraded to DMP on Friday. If we lose Sanders, Chuba Hubbard is practically minimum on both sides. He's going to get played. I don't care about playing Hubbard. Let's not even talk about that. Everyone can figure out themselves. What I want to know is, and you're thinking on the spot, I want to know is who do you think gets lost in builds? Who do people then come off of if Hubbard is the starter? Because that's the player I want to gravitate to. So let's say you're at Alexander Madison 5,800, and then suddenly you get 4,800. Chuba Hubbard on DraftKings. So you're coming down. How do the builds change? Does ownership then gravitate to Diggs Tyreek doubles because you can now afford it with Hubbard? What is the most rostered stack at that point? Because I want to know ahead of time so that I can be prepared for it to go to popular players who are then not popular. This is the way my brain works.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the Zach Moss, like he gets
squeezed
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's good.
Maybe Javonte.
Yeah. I think Madison gets squeezed.
I think Madison's getting played. I think people are playing him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zach Moss getting lost is interesting because I do think he's an amazing play, even like right now in ownership, and he's not even going to be that high rostered.
Yeah, he makes the most sense. Him and Javonte, I think, get squeezed the most. But obviously, we have to think about that more.
Given that I want to play Pollard, I kind of want Sanders to go because I think that's the type of guy you could see maybe more of, right? You have the extra salary.
Yeah.
You go from like 2 of those guys in the 6K range to like a Pollard and a Hubbard. And
Ayuk Kittle would be interesting then because Hubbard would probably let cash games for sure get up to McCaffrey, and then that trickles down into tournament builds. So then we try to pivot off with the passing game instead.
We're about one pivot away from chat asking us to just do a lineup building show every week. So we better bail pretty damn quick. Let's throw out. Just give me your defenses real quick, Kyren.
I'll do the Texans. I talked about how I'm not really that into it, and so just bet against him.
Daigle.
The minimum defense I like quite a bit this week is the Panthers. The Vikings, obviously leading the league in dropbacks, so we have volume going for us. And I know the Panthers are banged up, but the Vikings are also coming off 78 plays. And the Panthers are back at home. So it's just kind of, you're taking the volume here. Even against the Saints, at least the Panthers hung around and covered the spread. They only lost by 3 points in a tight one. So I think you could sneak into Panthers at a pretty low cost.
Yeah. Especially over on DraftKings, Browns are just like the obvious cash game defense, the best defense in the league at 2,800. It's pretty much a no-brainer. Baltimore 25th in adjusted sack rate allowed. Cleveland getting after the passer at the ninth best rate when adjusted. So just throw Browns and cash. It's pretty easy. As always, we thank you, all the viewers and listeners. Much appreciated for you guys sticking around, or if you are listening throughout the weekend, appreciate that as well. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please give us a 5-star rating review. It's the easiest way to give back to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit those alerts so you know when we are going live. And if you haven't signed up for 4 for 4 yet, make sure you check out the description in the YouTube description. We have the 25% off YouTube code there. The code is YouTube at 44.com/plans. Make sure after you do that, you upgrade to the solver and you get access to the best optimizer in DFS. And finally, make sure you click that legendary upside link. Kyren has a lot of stuff going on over there. Kyren, remind everybody what you got going on at Legendary Upside.
Yeah, I've got to walk through this big old game by game preview that you can check out. Lots of great advanced stats in there. I think it's helpful for DFS, but also if you're doing, any of the pick'em stuff, prop betting, setting your lineups, it's kind of multi-use that way. If you're into audio, which I assume you are, you're listening to this, I narrate the podcast. I narrate the article as a podcast. You can check that out. A free preview of that on the Legendary Upside podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you are a premium subscriber, then you get the whole thing narrated, which can, nice little thing to take on the go this weekend as you prep for your DFS.
Yeah, go ahead, Daigle. You're muted.
But you don't have Little Caesars ads with my voice.
Hey, those are those fire.
So your podcast, go away.
Yeah, tons of great data in there, and everybody loves the fresh, sexy data viz. But I'm a big fan of old school heat maps for matchups, especially for DFS fantasy matchups. And Kyren has a lot of really easy to digest heat maps for the matchups in there, so it's really awesome. Make sure you are following him and us on X/Twitter. Pat is at Pat Kyren, Legendary Upside at Legendary Upside. Daigle is at Not J Daigle. 4 for 4 is at 4 for 4 football. I'm at TJ Hernandez. We'll talk to you guys Sunday morning in the Discord.